Hello, this is Mrs. Politsky, and I have AP Psychology notes for Chapter 7, talking about cognition. And this is the last of our notes, and we're going to be talking a little bit about certain abilities that good thinkers possessed. So, as we begin, make sure you find the right spot in your notes and follow along. So, what abilities do good thinkers possess? Well, good thinkers not only have a repertoire of effective strategies such as algorithms or heuristics, they also know how to avoid common impediments to problem solving and decision making. Human thought is not always purely logical, it departs from logic that allows us to fantasize, daydream, act creatively, react unconsciously, or respond emotionally, or generate ideas that cannot be tested against reality. We are, of course, capable of careful reasoning. The ability to think psychologically enhances our ability to solve problems and to make effectively good decisions. So, problem solving. Effective problem solvers have certain characteristics. They possess the requisite knowledge for solving problems that they face. You might be skilled at identifying the problem or selecting certain strategies to attack a problem. So, when identifying a problem, a good problem solver learns to consider all the event without leaping to any kind of conclusions. A good problem solver considers all the possibilities before committing to one solution. Selecting a strategy. This is the second ingredient of successful problem solving that requires selecting a strategy that fits the problem at hand. When we use step-by-step procedures or formulas, these are called algorithms. In addition, expert problem solvers have a repertoire of more intuitive, maybe less precise strategies called heuristics. So, algorithms, these are problem solving procedures that typically involve formulas that can generate a correct outcome if the correct formula is applied, but they cannot necessarily solve every type of problem. A heuristic is a cognitive strategy that is sometimes known as a rule of thumb. It's a shortcut and can help us solve complex mental tasks. But unlike an algorithm, heuristics do not involve the correct solution. So you could use a heuristic, but it's not a guaranteed problem solver. Some types of heuristic strategies that you may have used in your lifetime, working backwards. So if you've ever gone to the back of your math book where some of the answers to some of the problems are located, you might look at the answer and then try to figure out how that math problem was particularly solved by working backwards. This may eliminate many false starts and dead ends that would otherwise stumble into trial and error. You can search for an analogy. Okay, if a new problem is similar to another one you have faced before, you might employ a strategy that you've learned previously. The trick to recognizing the similarity or analogy between the new problem and the old one is kind of the task here. Breaking down a big problem. The best strategy may be to break down a big problem down into smaller, more manageable steps, often known as subcategories. The Wright brothers were known for doing that when they were trying to figure out how to get their plane to fly. Obstacles to problem solving. There's some troublesome obstacles that problem solvers need to face, and that is your mental set. That's a tendency to respond to a new problem in a manner that you've used previously. And most people, whether they realize it or not, eventually can solve a problem, a scrambled word problem with an algorithm by rearranging the order of letters in the same way. It's also possible that we might suffer from functional fixedness. This is the inability to perceive a new use for an object associated with a different purpose. A form of mental set, like, you need a screwdriver, you might not have one, so you might use a dime or maybe a butter knife or something like that to tighten a screw. Self-imposed limitations. We can be our own worst enemy when we impose unnecessary limitations on ourselves. So we're going to take a look at eventually the classic 9-dot figure, which is in your textbook, figure 7.2. And to solve this one, you must connect all 9 dots with no more than 4 connecting straight lines. And that can be done without lifting your pencil from the paper. Sometimes you have to kind of work outside of the box, or the dots in this case. Other obstacles, the lack of specific knowledge required to solve the problem, maybe a lack of interest, low self-esteem, fatigue, drugs, all of that. Moderate levels of arousal facilitate problem solving, but high stress levels can also make problem solving almost impossible. So, speaking of using some of these heuristics, we have a list of some scrambled up words, and I had mentioned before that if you use kind of a little formula, by perhaps maybe moving some of our letters around, you might be able to find the answers. So I'm going to kind of flip back here. You can kind of see that we've moved our first couple of letters and rearranged them, and we have solved the problem. This is our 9-dot problem, and a moment ago we talked a little bit about the fact that you could draw 4 straight lines to connect all 9 dots. The key here is working outside of the box. The fact that a lot of times people who will do this, they'll try to stay contained within the dots themselves. But as I flip this, you can see that we have 1, 2, 3, 4 lines that are straight, but for the most part they're able to connect all the 9 dots, but they do have to go outside of the box a little bit to do so. And the question is, when you're solving problems, are you willing to think outside of the box? Judging and making decisions. Confirmation bias, which is something we talked about back way in chapter 2. This is to ignore or find a fault with information that does not fit our opinions, or to seek information intentionally that we agree with. Hindsight bias is that a tendency after we've learned about an event to second guess or to believe that we kind of have predicted it or we knew it all along. The Monday morning quarterbacks are a great example of that. Anchoring bias, this is a faulty heuristic caused by basing or anchoring an estimate on a completely unrelated quantity. Working backwards, this is an example of that, kind of using some of the Tolman's work. So we have our maze, we've got the prize. Can we have the mouse kind of figure out how to get back to the beginning of this maze? Okay, whoops. There we go. Representative biasness. There we go. This is a faulty heuristic strategy based on the presumption that once people or events are categorized, they all share the features of a number of other numbers within that category, such as all blondes are dumb or math teachers are nerds. They're really kind of based on certain prejudices. While your representative bias of judging someone perhaps by their type may not be essentially important as in some cases. Availability bias, this is another faulty heuristic that comes from our tendency to judge the probabilities of events by how readily examples come to mind. Faulty heuristic strategies that estimate probabilities based on information that can be recalled or made available from personal experiences. People usually judge their chances of being murdered or mugged as being much more higher than people who watch little or no TV. Psychology in our life. Becoming a creative genius. Creativity is a mental process by which novel responses that contribute to solutions to problems. Most would agree that a genius is someone who has some insight and creativity are so great that they set that individual apart from individual folks. The boundary for a genius is not well defined. So creative geniuses, as not so superhero. The notion that creative geniuses are a breed apart might actually discourage people from thinking creatively. Creativity comes from extensive knowledge and high motivation, and certain personality characteristics that are not necessarily superhuman talents. Most creative individuals have a highly developed understanding of the basic knowledge of their fields. You can't become highly creative without first becoming kind of an expert. Okay, just having that extensive, organized knowledge in your field that kind of allows you to become creative. High levels of motivation can also sustain an individual through years of intensive training, and they believe that about 10 years of work are required to master the knowledge and skill fully required to have competence in virtually any field, such as skiing, sculpture, singing, psychology, teaching, you name it. Aptitudes, personality, characteristics, and creativity. We had talked about Howard Gardner a while back, but around 1993 he argued that extraordinary creativity that we see in works like Freud or Einstein or Picasso and others is a combination of several factors, not only expertise and motivation, but also patterns of abilities and personality characteristics. Highly creative individuals, he says, have aptitudes, largely innate potentialities, specific to certain domains. And these aptitudes allow them to become fairly creative. So independence is a certain characteristic here that highly creative people have, and an ability to resist social pressures to conform to conventional ways of thinking, at least perhaps maybe in their area of interest. Intense interest in the problem. Highly creative individuals also must have an all-consuming interest in their subject matter. Willingness to reconstruct a problem. These individuals seem to are drawn to the complexity, and what they appear to be messy or chaotic to other people, they find very fascinating. A need for stimulating interaction. These creative people, for the most part, are, their highest order almost always grows out of interaction with other highly creative individuals. So they have a tendency to network and interact with others. Creativity. This requires a well-developed knowledge of the field in which the creative contribution would be made. A high level of creativity requires certain personality characteristics like independence and motivation required to sustain the interest of an unsolved problem over a long period of time. And finally, a group of individuals that we're going to probably spend a little more time talking about are savants. These are individuals who have a highly developed skill, but they also suffer from a mental handicap. And included within your notes are 2 links to 2 videos. These 2 gentlemen that you see here pictured on the screen are basically defined as savants, but they have a great amount of skill within their fields. And I would like you to take a look at that so we can discuss that when you return. So thank you very much.